Hey, it's Mem from Exumer, and you're watching CMS TV.
It is Chris Akin Presents, and I, of course, am Chris Akin. And today we are going to get very fierce and very heavy with one of the best extreme metal albums of the year. I am talking about the Death Mask Messiah. It is out on August the 28th. The band is Exumer, and here to talk about it, the main man himself, it is Mem Stein. Mem, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am great, man. It's great to talk to you. Great to be talking Death Mask Messiah. Not gonna lie, I didn't know if we were ever gonna talk about another record from Exumer. What's it been, 7, 8 years or something since that?
7, yeah, 7.
All right, so I guess we'll start there at the obvious. Where you been?
All right, well, good question. Um, so as you might know, our last record, Hostile Defiance, dropped in early or spring of 2019. Which was followed by us supporting the album, doing a spring tour right away, then playing festivals in 2019, the festival circuit, and then we rounded off the year with a winter tour, pretty much late fall, early winter. Supported the record, and then we were kind of getting ready to do the same thing, rinse and repeat, in 2020, and then everything came to a dead halt, and that stop was caused by the pandemic, as everybody knows.
Sure.
And so that ate away a few years. And during that time, everybody handled the pandemic and, with their own coping mechanisms and the way they figured it out for themselves. But it definitely made, we had to stop touring. And nevertheless, we started writing for Death Mask in 2021, late 2021. I went to Germany for the first sessions for that. And then in 2022, our bass player kind of signaled that he would probably not be with us very much longer. And then Tony left in 2023. And Alex, who had filled in for Tony on our last tour in 2019, was there to spot us again for some shows in 2023. And then he played on our tour with Hyrex, European tour, in 2024, and became a permanent member. So basically, between the pandemic and then also our drummer Matthias left, he was exhausted he was a drum tech for a Creator, among other bands. He was just getting to the point where, he was heading towards a mental breakdown, because, touring with Creator, touring with Halloween, touring with Udo, and then touring with us,
Sure.
was just too much. And Jerome helped us out in 2024 with our first European tour back from the pandemic. And when Matthias signaled that he wanted to take a break, a longer break, we asked Jerome to come into the band. And then basically we had to be back on the road, right? We hadn't played for 3 years pretty much. So 24, 25, we played a lot, but then we also finished writing, and then end of 25, we started recording Death Mask. So that's everything in a nutshell, which happens. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I ask that question every time. And as soon as you guys start talking about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, 7 years ago was the pandemic.
Yeah.
And, everybody forget. It's funny how, as brutal as it was, everybody's sort of forgotten that window was there.
It was a weird time. I think a lot of it is kind of like a wash for a lot of people. Yeah. And, it's just blurry. And, at the time I had a kid in 2018, late 2018. So my kid was about 2. But it was okay because he was not in an age where he was not in school and whatnot. So, I remember taking him on walks, endless walks, and he was still in a stroller. So, it was great. I walked around and he fell asleep. And, mid 2020, he went back to daycare. And then, I did my my stuff online. But it was just a weird time, and I think, like I said, everybody handled it different. And but the end result for us was that there's a delay between there's a gap of seven
Hmm.
years between records, and but we never gave up. We never were going to give up. Or
Sure.
it was all, but we just didn't want to. If you notice with our records, they sound quite organic, meaning
Hmm.
we don't sound like a band. I live in the States, the other guys live in Germany, but
Sure.
they all don't live in the same part of Germany. So we're a band that is kind of scattered, but our live shows and our records sound like we are a band that kind of like is tight. And the reason for that is because we pay close attention to that detail.
Hmm.
And we always want to come across like a band. We're not a project. So the band chemistry among the members that has to be right, but also we want to make sure that sonically we come across like a actual band, not just people who are just kind of
Sure.
1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Hmm.
So that's another reason why, for us, it's we're going to put out a product that we are behind the product, but also we know that our fans are going to stand behind the product. So that's really important too. So when you put in all these factors together, that's what you get.
Sure. Who is the main? I don't even know how to phrase this. I'm just going to say it, and if it makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense,
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Who's the main ear? Who's the one that listens to the parts as they come in and says, you know what? Maybe that's sounding a little too European for what we do, or too thrashy, or not thrashy enough.
I mean, Ray has always been like our musical director since day
Okay.
one. Like because Ray and I started this thing in '85, and he was always the guitar player. So back in the day, I was writing riffs with the bass, but really like the arrangements and composing the music was since day one. I relied on Ray to really do that part, and he handles this part. For this record, for the first time in our band's history, we actually had Mark contribute two full songs to a
Okay.
record, and it's the first time in since we started in '85 that somebody else actually wrote and contributed like two fully arranged tracks. And that's because we feel very comfortable with Mark. He's been with us since 2013. He is a very talented musician in his own right. And we wanted to give him the platform to, that the band has to express himself within the framework of Exumer, right? So it'll
Sure.
still sound like an Exumer track. You won't be able to tell it apart, really. But that's how we been operating for 40 years with Ray being the main person behind the compositions sonically. And obviously I do all the lyrics. I come up with the album concept. Even this time around, I wrote the treatment for the video clip for Death Mask. I came up with a
Okay.
concept around that. So, everybody has their little jobs in the band. So all at the end of the day, we operate as a unit, meaning we are a band with equal parts, but everybody has a role to play, and everybody has to, come to the table and actually fulfill their part.
Right on. Well, let's dig into it a little bit, man. First and foremost, this thing is way more aggressive than
Mhm.
Hostile Defiance. And I didn't even think that was a possibility. But
Oh
when I
yeah,
heard it, I was like, woof, these guys are mad.
yeah.
You know,
Well,
what is that conscious or is that just where you
um,
are?
every record is a reflection of our state of mind, right,
Okay.
and of our
Mhm.
being. So two things happen, right? Obviously, that it was a very difficult period for the band with people leaving, the pandemic, all that stuff that we discussed earlier. But also, we got a kind of like an injection of these two younger folks on the bottom end,
Mhm.
with drums and bass, which now open up the door to new possibilities. Meaning, we can write riffs that are extremely fast, and the bottom end can support it. It's very difficult to do certain things if what is happening, with the drum and bass can't support what's happening with the riffs. And so not only is the vibe more aggressive because that's where we took it naturally, because we don't plan these things. We just kind
Mhm.
of like we write a song, then the next song, and the next song, and then what you hear is basically how we feel. And but also we have the capacity now to do this,
Right.
and that comes with the musicianship, and that comes with folks that can actually operate, whatever we cook up in our heads, or what Ray comes up with, or even Mark. We have no doubt that it can be supported on the bottom and the low end,
Mhm.
and that's why this record turned out to be the way it is, because we are now, I think, musically, in terms of craftsmanship and everything, we are at a different level at this point. And we can actually, if we say, hey, this riff's got to be played more aggressive, or the song's got to sound a certain way, we can actually do that. We can put it into operating that.
Sure.
Hey metalheads, tired of waiting for new episodes? Crave the real raw classic metal show? For just $4.99 a month, you can become a CMS VIP. You get every episode a full week early, completely uncensored, and 100% commercial free. It's the only place to interact directly with the show, plus you score the Fast Pass, so your song requests get bumped straight to the head of the line on every live version. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe right now at classicmetalshow.locals.com and become a CMS VIP today.
Now, I know this from being a failed musician, that
Yeah.
when you're in with guys, you don't necessarily see their weaknesses. And
Hmm.
again, I'm not even trying to
Yeah.
badmouth the other guys,
Yeah.
but when you get new guys in, you realize that they were there. You know what I mean? You realize that they were there because you realize that you can do this, this, and this, that you
Right. Yeah.
almost rode away from, instinctively.
Yeah. I mean,
Did you find that?
exactly.
Did
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
find?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a thing of like, okay, if somebody would ask me to sing in a band where they would say, you gotta sound like Ronnie James Dio. Sorry, bro, I can't do it.
Right.
Like, even if I would attempt it, and let's say that band would be like, you know what, we love Mem, and even though he doesn't sound like Ronnie, we're just gonna keep him.
Mhm.
So within the parameters of what is possible, they would write music, and I would try to
Sure.
sing like Ronnie, never sounding like Ronnie,
Right.
but then that would be what is given, and this is what we're gonna work with the tools that we have. And like you say, instinctively, you don't take it to a place which you can't operationalize. You
Mhm.
won't be like, oh, here's a riff that's super sonically fast, and I just don't have a drummer who can play it, but we're going to play it anyway. That's just not.
Right.
That's just bad decision making at that point. And so yeah, it happens on a subconscious level, where you
Mhm.
just kind of like say, all right, this is what we can do. This is the scope of our sound, and that's what we're going to be doing, and that's perfectly fine.
Right on.
But now we don't have these limitations, in the sense, and we really, we play to those strengths, I think,
Mhm.
in this on this new record. And also, when we come up with a record, it has to have our signature sound. It has to sound like an Exumer record.
Mhm.
So a certain amount of aggression, certain amount of like the riffs, you need to be familiar with our song. That if you're familiar with our sound, we don't want to throw a monkey wrench in it. And it's like, now there's a song that sounds like Nine Inch Nails. Like,
Right. Right.
we're
Right.
not going to do that, right? So that is a conscious decision. But we also want to have records that are not exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
So there's a little twist on every record. One sounds maybe a little more experimental, one sounds like that. So we really try to give our fans an experience of, all right, you love Exumer, you're going to get Exumer, but it's going to be a little different, because
Sure.
you don't want to buy the same record 15 times over. So that's the only conscious decision that we make,
Right.
in a sense. And we make sure that you're not getting bored. And I don't want to put out records that, I don't know if you do that, but I know plenty of times when, I'll buy a record, I listen to it twice and then I file it.
Oh yeah,
You
all the
know,
time,
like,
all the
so
time.
I don't want that. We
Mhm.
don't want that. We want records that you go back to from time and time again, and you enjoy them. And like with anything new in the beginning, it's nice, new, and shiny, and you listen to it a million times, and then you file it away. But we want you to think about, oh, you know what? I want to go back to that record.
Right on.
That's a cool record. It kicks ass. So I want that to happen, right? And we as a band want that to happen. And so quality over quantity any day.
I agree fully, man. Well, let's talk about a song or two on the record before we
Sure.
run out of time here. I'll start with the title track. I read it's inspired by Waco or David Koresh.
Yep.
I'm gonna be honest, just this is me looking at it, and you could tell me I'm full of shit, which is fine.
Yeah.
I don't think it's only about that. I think it's
No.
much, much bigger, a lot more dealing with being pushed the wrong way and being, so you tell me, is it what else other than Waco is kind of the theme here?
So in my, like, the way my brain works, right? And when I come up with concepts and ideas, it's never about one thing and one thing only. There will be always shades of different things. So there are two strains of thoughts on this record. One is the Waco incident, and that inspired me to come up with the title. And because I was listening to the radio and I heard this guy who was like a expert on the topic, and he had just released a book on it, and he was talking about how the federal government spun one narrative, and then there was another reality to the incident.
Right. Sure.
And that made me think, oh, wow, this is exactly what's happening now. It's the same playbook, right? And even if we go further than that, Vietnam War, same thing, right? There's a narrative like, yeah, we're kicking ass and we're destroying the enemy, but really not so much. And we're going to be out of there in 2 minutes. And then then it's like
That's
5 years
13
later,
right?
right? So it's that playbook. And so the song is representative of Waco, and definitely about how David Koresh was portraying himself as a messiah, and promising salvation, telling his followers not to sleep with their wives while he is sleeping with their wives, and being a false prophet, sort of wearing a mask, and saying, oh, I'm going to lead you to salvation, which ended up in death and destruction, hence Death Mask Messiah. But also any politician that says, hey, I got these great ideas, and I'm gonna implement these policies, and then your lives are going to be improved immensely, and then we vote them in, and then crickets. And even worse, the opposite happens.
Yeah.
So the song deals with those ideas, basically, about false prophets, promises made but not kept. All these things that, very much align, and they kind of feed into each other. And so that's the representation on a broader level. And that's why we thought it was a good idea to use that song as the first single, because it sets the tone for the rest of the record, thematically, in terms of lyrics, but also in terms of basically sonically as well. So it starts off, and there's not much left to the imagination. This record is going to be a bruiser, right? So that's what we wanted, and I think that's what that song achieves.
Right on. Then the other one I'll ask about is Unchained Angel. Obviously, throwing back to the early days of the band. I'm assuming that's how Nasty Ronnie gets on there from Nasty Savage. Tell me about covering it and working with Ronnie in this way.
Yeah. So in 1988, we did our first major European tour with Nasty Savage and Adam Kraft out of Birmingham, England, and us. Since then, decades later, we're still friends. Obviously, social media makes everything smaller and the world smaller and
Right.
access smaller. And when it came to thinking about, doing a bonus track, we always have bonus tracks on our records. And then what we want to achieve with when we cover a song is give a song a different flavor, if you will, or a different dress.
Mhm.
We want to dress it up in a way where it's not the same thing. And we want to add to it in a sense of like make it worthwhile. And I was talking to Ray, and we were thinking about, back in the day, and I remembered the tour, whatever. And I was like, you know what? One of my first tape that I traded back in the early 80s was Wage of Mayhem.
Okay.
And I was like, dude, I love the way that they played Unchained Angel on that demo. They
Mhm.
re-recorded it later in the 80s, but it was
Sure.
a lot more polished, cleaned up, and just a little different. And I said, how about we try to emulate the vibe of
The
the
demo.
demo version and cover that, you know? And he was like, yeah, why not? And then I said, let me reach out to Ronnie. I wrote him, we're friends on Facebook, whatnot. And I said, this is our idea. How would you feel, sharing vocals with me? He's like, yeah, dude, let's do it. And that's how the whole thing came up. He was on board immediately. And, I think it was it's a nice, um, it's a gift to us for both bands, basically, to say, hey, you know what? We're honoring the past, we're honoring our friendship. And it's a cool thing to cover that, we both bands can relate to that song and the
Mhm.
time and that era and that, where we were. And I mean, Ronnie is a little older than me, and it's cool, like even like to, we talked about the track, what he was thinking. And so overall, I think it was the right choice that we made.
Sure.
And it's just not like some random song we picked. Oh, we got to come up with a bonus. Everybody
Right.
pick, throw a bunch of ideas in a hat, and then we pull it out of the hat. And then even if it's unrelated, let's do it.
Yep.
It's
Right.
not that. So yeah, that's how that came about, and we're very happy about it.
Right on, man. Well, dude, here on this show, we tell everybody if you're going to stream it, fine. Once, twice, maybe even three times you can stream it. But if you like it at that point, buy it. Buy
Oh yeah,
it, buy something, buy a hat, buy a shirt, buy one song, whatever, just to help the bands survive.
yeah.
Where is the best place for us to direct people to buy Death Mask Messiah?
Well, obviously they can buy it off Metal Blade on the
Right on.
website. We're streaming it on all platforms, so any known platform, it's there.
Sure.
Um, we have our own website. You can go onto our social media accounts. We're represented everywhere, and there are links to our web store. And most importantly, come to our live shows.
Right on.
So that's where we really connect with fans. That's where you know if somebody buys a record, a vinyl record, or or a CD, for whatever physical format we have, I'll sign it for you. I'm not
Sure.
a rock star. I've never been. I'm a punk rocker. I'm a punk rocker at heart.
Right.
That's how I mean. I was a punk rocker when I was a kid, and I'm still a punk rocker. So, um, I'm gonna, if you bring me your physical copy of the record, I'll sign it. I'll
Right on.
take a picture with you, whatever you want. Because if we don't have time for our fans, then we might as well just pack it up and just call it a day. So that's how we really connect, and that will be the best opportunity. Really, is like to connect to the band and take a physical piece home. Like I went to see Rush a couple weeks ago here in
Okay.
New York, and I hadn't seen them. I saw them 3 times in the '80s, and then I stopped going to see them, and I went to see them here at the Garden. They were so amazing. I was like, I'm a fan now. I'm going to buy a T-shirt.
Right.
And Rush sells a million T-shirts.
Right.
They sold out the Garden 4 days in a row. But it doesn't matter. I wanted to have a piece of that show with me, and
Mhm.
maybe if I can't wear it one day, my son will wear it.
There
But
you
I
go.
wanted to have a piece of that show. So I think that's a really great opportunity.
Right on, man. Well, another great opportunity is purchasing Death Mask Messiah. Do not wait. Buy this thing. Fantastic record from Exumer. And Mem, this has been fun, man. Thanks for joining me here on Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, metalheads. Tired of the same old boring radio? Crank it up and dive into CMS 24/7 at cmsradio.net. Non-stop, the greatest, wildest segments from over 20 years of the classic metal show. Uncensored, unfiltered, and completely insane. Hear Neely's legendary rants, Chris losing his mind, and every wild character that made the show a cult classic. Plus, catch the latest full episode with all the music every single day at noon Eastern. Lock in now at cmsradio.net and feel the hilarity, the chaos, and the glory of metal history. CMS 24/7, because CMS lunacy never sleeps.